subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell. It's easy, it's fast, and it helps us create new content for you. The first time I slept with another man was the same day my husband rushed me to the hospital, convinced I was having an anxiety attack. It was a Tuesday in March. Gustavo, my husband, had come home early from work, a rare event. He found me on the sofa, my hands trembling, my face a pale mask. My only thought was whether the other man had left a mark, whether his scent still clung to my skin. I wasn't afraid of what I had done. I was terrified that Gustavo would find out. He thought it was stress, or maybe a sudden drop in blood pressure. He insisted on taking me to the hospital. In the car, he held my hand with a tenderness that made my stomach turn. The doctor said everything was fine. Just exhaustion. That was the diagnosis. No one knew that earlier that morning, at precisely 11:20, I had been in a stranger's house. My lingerie pooled on the floor. I hadn't sought him out. Or at least, that's what I like to tell myself. It happened during a routine check of our water heater. A tall technician with large hands and a slow country drawl. He spoke to me without hurry, without once glancing at his watch. He looked at me as if he truly saw me, as if I wasn't a mother or a wife, but just me, Mariana. It was a silly conversation. I offered him coffee, and he told me his hands were always cold from working with metal. And when his fingers brushed against my wrist, I didn't pull away. It wasn't love. It wasn't passion. It was an escape. For days, I tormented myself over what I had done. But then, I felt alive. The problem wasn't that I did it. The problem was that I didn't stop. Gustavo, so methodical and absorbed in his routine, didn't notice. At least, not at first. He had never been a jealous or suspicious man, but he was obsessive about schedules. He always knew what time I left work, how long the number 67 bus took, the exact number of minutes it took me to get from the front gate to the sofa. If I was late, he would ask about it, his tone calm, but his eyes sharp. That was my first mistake. That Thursday, I told him I was going to a happy hour with the girls from work. It wasn't a complete lie. One of them had organized a get-together. But I slipped away after the first glass of wine. I said I was tired, and while they were saying their goodbyes with kisses and emojis in the group chat, I was crossing the street toward the car of the technician, Ricardo. When I got home at 2 in the morning, my hair still carrying the scent of his cologne, Gustavo was in the living room. The lights were off, save for his single reading lamp. He didn't say anything. He just looked up from his book and said, "I hope you had fun." I nodded, kissed his forehead, and went straight to the bathroom. He didn't ask any more questions that night, nor the next, but he started to act strangely. He wouldn't look at me the same way across the dinner table. He spoke less. He began leaving his laptop in the living room, something he never did, and using it without headphones. It was as if he wanted me to hear what he was watching. Videos on topics that had never interested him before. Psychology, relationships, even a podcast about infidelity. I noticed, but I said nothing. I feigned indifference, though inside, something was beginning to stir. It wasn't guilt. It was a growing unease. I felt he had already sensed the shift in me. One afternoon, while I was folding laundry in the bedroom, I overheard him on the phone with his sister. I'm sure he didn't know I was listening. I don't know, he was saying. Something's off with Mariana. She used to tell me everything. Now she barely talks. She goes out more. And sometimes I feel like she's avoiding me. I don't want to think the worst, but it's like her mind is somewhere else. I know what she's like when she's nervous. I can see it. I stood there, frozen, with one of his shirts in my hands. It hurt to hear him say that, because there was no anger in his voice, only doubt and disappointment. Even then, I didn't feel remorse. I felt fear. Not fear that he would leave me, but that he would uncover something I couldn't even explain to myself. The final blow came the following Saturday. We were at my in-laws' house for the usual tedious lunch, with the kids running around the garden. Gustavo was calm, even more talkative than usual, as if he were putting on a performance. I was on the sofa with his mother when he stood up and said, "I'm just going to pop over to the hardware store. I need something for a light switch." He left without any sense of urgency. 20 minutes later, he was back. He wasn't carrying a bag, and he wasn't the same man who had left. When he walked in, he wore that expression of his, the one he gets when he's forcing himself into silence to keep from exploding. He pulled me into a corner. "Are you cheating on me, Mariana?" he asked. Just like that. No preamble. I froze. I stared at him, my face a blank canvas. It wasn't the question. It was his tone. He was certain. "Why would you ask me that?" I managed, trying to sound innocent. But it was useless. "Because I'm not an idiot," he replied. "And because I saw you, Mariana, today, getting out of a car that isn't yours, kissing a man, and it wasn't a friendly goodbye." I didn't know what to say. Literally, I wanted to say something, anything, but every word that came to mind sounded like a pathetic excuse. "Where were you?" I asked, out of sheer reflex. He looked at me with a mixture of disgust and pain. "I followed you. When you said you were going to buy a new pair of pants, it didn't feel right, so I followed you. The worst part is, I wasn't surprised. I just needed to see it for myself." I swallowed hard. My hands started to shake again. A knot tightened in my stomach. But it wasn't sadness. It was a kind of horrible relief. I didn't have to hide anymore. But at what cost? "How long?" he asked. "How long have you stopped caring about any of this?" At that moment, I couldn't continue the charade. "I don't know, Gustavo. It wasn't planned. I didn't want to hurt you." That last phrase slipped out on its own, and I regretted it instantly because it was the spark that lit the fuse. "You didn't want to hurt me? You're making a fool out of me," he hissed, grabbing my arm. It was a firm grip, but not violent. "You think this doesn't hurt me? Sleeping with another man and then coming home, kissing my children, sleeping next to me? You call that not hurting me?" I didn't know how to respond. I just lowered my head. He let go of my arm and took a step back. "Tell me the truth, Mariana. Are you in love with him?" I shook my head. No, it wasn't love. It never was. It was an escape route. But how do you explain that to someone who thought you were his refuge? So why did you keep doing it? What the hell was going through your head to make you throw all this away? I looked at him, with fear, with anger, with helplessness. "I don't know, Gustavo. I felt invisible. I felt like another piece of furniture in this house. I didn't do it for revenge. It it just happened." We stood in silence. My in-laws were still in the living room. They knew nothing, but the two of us, standing in that hallway, were no longer the same people. "This isn't over, Mariana," he said, and walked out to his car. That's when I knew the fall had only just begun. Gustavo didn't come home that night. He didn't answer my texts. I didn't call. I wouldn't have known what to say. I sat for hours on the sofa, the children sleeping upstairs, staring at my phone screen without touching it, waiting for the sound of a key in the lock that never came. I got up at 6, made coffee I didn't drink, and prepared the children's breakfast as if nothing had happened. I dropped them off at school with a smile that ached. I was broken, but I couldn't let it show. When I returned, I saw Gustavo's car in the driveway. My legs trembled as I walked up the stairs. I entered our bedroom and saw him sitting on the bed, still in yesterday's clothes. His eyes were swollen. I couldn't tell if it was from a lack of sleep or from tears. He didn't say anything when he saw me, and neither did I. I closed the door and stood there. I needed him to speak first because I had no idea where to begin, but he remained silent. I walked over and sat on the edge of the bed. Then, without looking at me, he said, "I've already spoken to a lawyer." I was still. He says that if there's proof of infidelity, the settlement changes. Custody, assets, everything. "Are you going to do that?" I asked in a low voice. "Are you going to take the children from me?" Gustavo finally turned to face me. His eyes were empty. All traces of the man I knew gone. "I don't know, Mariana. I don't want to hurt them, but I can't live with this. Do you think this is just some argument? It's not. You crossed a line that can't be uncrossed." I didn't argue. I couldn't. He stood up, went to the closet, and took out a backpack. He started putting clothes inside. "Are you leaving?" I asked. "Yes," he replied, his back to me. "I'm going to my sister's for a few days, until I figure out what to do with all this." I went to him. "Gustavo, I wasn't thinking. I didn't plan any of it. It just—" He let out a bitter laugh. "That much is clear. You did it without thinking. As if you didn't have a family, or children, or a husband. As if all of this was disposable." I touched his arm. He pulled away with a sharp gesture. Not violent, but decisive. "No, don't do that. Don't touch me. Don't try to be affectionate now. You lied to me. You lied to my face for weeks, maybe months, and now you want me to understand." "I just want you to listen to me," I pleaded. "I am listening," he shot back. "But everything coming out of your mouth sounds hollow. You deceived me, Mariana. You slept with me after being with him. What kind of person does that?" I had so many things to say, but none of them fit. Nothing could justify what I had done. Not the boredom, not the routine, not the feeling of emptiness. Nothing. And that was the worst part. I couldn't defend myself without sounding pathetic. I don't love him. I don't even know why I kept seeing him. He doesn't complete me. He isn't better than you, or smarter, or more handsome. He looked at me. He talked to me. He made me feel something, even if it was a lie. Gustavo turned, looking at me again. "And me? I didn't talk to you? I didn't look at you? Didn't I do everything for this family?" "Yes," I said. "You did everything for everyone but yourself. You forgot about yourself, Gustavo. You became a robot. Schedules, tasks, routines. We never went out. We never talked. You were always present, but it was like you weren't there, as if the only thing that mattered was that everything ran smoothly." Gustavo took a deep breath. "And that justifies sleeping with someone else?" No, I admitted. It doesn't justify it. I'm just trying to understand it myself. He was silent for a moment. Then he picked up his backpack. I don't know if I'm coming back, he said, and walked out. The following days were a living hell. My children asked about their father, and I made up excuses. Gustavo didn't block my number, but he didn't reply. One evening, I decided to go to his sister's house. He opened the door and looked at me without a word. Can we talk? I asked. He hesitated for a second, then stepped aside to let me in. We sat in the living room in silence, like two strangers. I'm not asking you to forgive me, I began. I just want to understand what's going to happen now, he sighed. I don't know either. Part of me wants to make you pay for this. Another part just wants to disappear. But the kids are here. They aren't to blame for your decisions. Are you going to tell them? I asked. Not now, he replied. But I can't promise I won't if this whole thing turns into a war. I asked if we could go to therapy. He told me he didn't know if he wanted to save anything, that he wasn't sure there was anything left to save. I don't trust you anymore, Mariana, he said. And if there's no trust, what's left? I had no answer. I left that house knowing nothing would ever be the same, and that most likely I deserved every second of this. A week after he left, Gustavo came back to the house without warning. It was 11 in the morning. I was working from my home office, wearing headphones. I saw him enter out of the corner of my eye, silent, without a greeting, without a glance in my direction. He went straight to his room. He didn't say a word. I stayed still, not knowing whether to get up, to ask him something, or to pretend nothing was happening. A few minutes later, he came out with a thick folder, put it in his backpack, and just as he was about to leave, he finally spoke to me. You need to be at the lawyer's office on Monday at 5 o'clock. His tone was dry, firm, like someone giving an order. What for? I asked. To sign the agreement, he said. I want to get this over with as quickly as possible. I was stunned. I knew this could happen, but not so fast. What agreement? The separation, shared custody, division of assets, use of the house, everything's in there. I stood up slowly. Gustavo, this is so drastic. Can't we talk more? See a couples therapist? Try something before jumping to the end? He looked at me with a mixture of disdain and exhaustion. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of a new stage where I don't have to look at you and wonder if you lied to me today. It's an attempt to live in peace. Is that what you want? I pressed. Really? Is there nothing left of what we were that's worth holding on to? Gustavo didn't answer. He simply opened the door and left. It wasn't anger anymore. It was something worse. It was coldness. On Monday, I went to the office as he had instructed. A woman greeted me and handed me a stack of papers. I recognized Gustavo's handwriting on the documents. It was a detailed agreement, meticulously planned, written in clear, precise language. He didn't want to fight over anything. He was leaving me the car, the house, the furniture. All he asked for was equal time with the children, and that neither of us pay alimony, since we both worked. It wasn't an act of revenge. It was an amputation. I felt sick, not because of what he was asking for, but because of what he was leaving behind. It was as if everything we had built no longer held any value for him, as if he would rather give me everything just to sever all contact. The lawyer explained that, by law, the agreement was viable. All it needed was my signature. Just as I finished reading, Gustavo walked in. He wore a suit, a crisp, white shirt, his hair combed back. Dark circles were etched beneath his eyes. He sat across from me without meeting my gaze. "Did you read it?" he asked, his voice flat. I nodded. "And what do you think?" "That it's fair," I managed to say. "So you'll sign it?" I hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Yes." "Perfect," he said. "That all of this ends today." He picked up the folder and waited. I stood up, looking at him. "Is that it?" I asked. "No," he said. "There's more." He handed me a flash drive. "I recommend you watch this at home, alone. And after you do, don't call me again. Everything has already been said." I left without another word. The drive home was a loop of dark, spiraling thoughts. When I arrived, I locked myself in the bedroom and plugged the flash drive into my laptop. It took a few seconds to load. There were folders, meticulously named: records, calls, messages, videos, audio, screenshots. I started by opening one. It was filled with screen captures of my conversations with Ricardo, some recent, some old, all perfectly organized. Then I found the audio files. They weren't mine. They were recordings of my conversations, made without my knowledge. Some from inside my car, others from calls I'd taken on speakerphone. And the videos, they were from a hidden camera, probably in our living room. My blood ran cold. There was a video of me on a video call with Ricardo, laughing, telling him I couldn't wait to see him again. Another showed me changing clothes in our bedroom while replying to a text from him. Everything was time-stamped, dated, contextualized. Gustavo hadn't screamed at me. He hadn't insulted me or broken a single thing. He had recorded me, filed me away, and exposed me with surgical precision, as if it were a professional assignment. And now, he had handed it all to me, like a final judgment, so that I could see it, so that I would know, so that I could never again deny it. He hadn't just left me. He had emotionally destroyed me in a clean, organized, scandal-free way. That hurt more than any insult ever could. The next morning, another blow landed. Opening my work email, I saw a notification from Human Resources. A file was attached. I opened it. It was a formal letter. My contract was temporarily suspended pending an internal investigation. They gave no details, but I understood immediately. One of the videos clearly showed me using a company meeting room after hours to meet with Ricardo. The location was unmistakable, and I had told Gustavo I was at a team dinner that night. I didn't know how he had obtained it, whether someone else had sent it, or if he had leaked it himself, but it no longer mattered. The damage was done. I spent the rest of the day motionless on the sofa, feeling hollowed out, nullified, as if my life was no longer my own. Gustavo hadn't just walked away. He had made sure the price for my betrayal was tangible, devastatingly real. The following Tuesday, Gustavo came by the house to pick up some boxes he'd left in storage. I was in the kitchen when I heard his key in the lock. I didn't move. I just waited. After several minutes, he came down, opened the storage closet, and walked past me with two medium-sized boxes, saying nothing. I watched him, wanting to speak, but unsure if I had the right. I took a deep breath and followed him to the door. As he set the boxes down to lock up, I spoke. "Gustavo, wait." He froze, his hand on the doorknob. "Can we talk for 5 minutes?" I asked. He didn't say yes, but he didn't refuse either. He closed the door and turned to face me. "5 minutes," he said, not moving from his spot. I leaned against the wall, a few feet from him. I know there's no way I can ask for forgiveness. Not after everything. And certainly not after what you did. I'm not going to make excuses. What I did was a betrayal, and I don't expect you to understand. I just want you to know that it hurts me, not just because of what happened, but because of how I failed you. Gustavo's expression didn't change. And what good does that do now? He asked. Do you think that because you feel bad, things will go back to how they were? I shook my head. I know they won't, but I needed to tell you. I've lost everyone's respect, even my children's. I'm out of a job, and you probably can't even stand to look at me. But I want to close this chapter with you, face to face, not with silence. Gustavo sat on the edge of the sofa. He didn't invite me to sit, but I did anyway, at the opposite end. He was silent for a long moment. Then, without looking at me, he spoke. I've been thinking this whole time too. Don't think for a second this was easy. I had to fight every urge to break everything, to scream at you, to hurt you with my words. But in the end, it all seemed like a waste of energy, because you had already done that to yourself. I swallowed hard. I know. And I don't just mean what you did with him, he continued. I mean everything. The months of pretending, the excuses you invented, the face you put on while I spoke to you with complete trust. You took away my dignity without a single shout. You stole my peace of mind without breaking a thing. You took yourself away from me without ever having left. I had no response. I wanted to say it wasn't so premeditated, that I never saw it. It's the demolition of our relationship, but it would have sounded like another lie. Gustavo ran a hand over his face. You don't know how many nights I wondered if this was my fault. If, by being so methodical, by focusing so much on the children, I made you feel alone. But then I realized that even if that were true, you had 1,000 ways to talk about it, to tell me, to face it with me. You chose another way, and that changes everything. I wanted to reach for his hand, but I held back. Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me? I asked. I don't know, he answered. And I don't want to answer you now because I won't give you false hope. Today, I can't. Today, all I can think about is how to start over without dragging all of this with me. And do you think we can still be a family for the children? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Yes, he said. For them, yes. I don't want them to live with hatred or to feel that one of their parents is the enemy. But that doesn't mean I forgive you. It means their stability is more important than my pain. The conversation went on for a few more minutes. I asked if he was seeing anyone. He said no, that he wasn't even considering it. All he wanted was to get his peace back. He asked if I still spoke to Ricardo. I told him no, that I had cut off all contact the moment I knew he had found out. He didn't seem to fully believe me, but he also didn't seem to care. This isn't about him, he said. It's about you. If it hadn't been him, it would have been someone else. This was your decision, not a coincidence. When he stood up to leave, he looked at me for the first time that entire afternoon. Mariana, I mean this sincerely. I don't wish you any harm. I don't want to see you suffer. But I can't be near you. You remind me of the worst thing I have ever lived through. I nodded, my eyes welling with tears. I understand. He picked up his boxes, opened the door, and just before he left, he said something I never expected. I'm changing my phone number. If the children need anything, I'll use email. I don't want to cut everything off, but I don't want to see you every week either. It's not for revenge. It's for my own sanity." I didn't know what to say. I just watched him walk down the hall and get into his car. This time, I didn't break down or cry right away. I just sat there and understood that there was nothing left to be said. 3 weeks have passed since that last conversation, and my life has become a blank space where I try to understand how I reached this point. I don't wake up thinking about him or Ricardo or the family I once had. I wake up thinking about how to get through the day without feeling like everything I touch will crumble. I woke up this morning in a bed I once shared with someone who knew me even in my silences. And now, I don't even share memories with him. There are no messages, no calls. No one asks how I am. The children are adapting to this absurd routine where their mother and father aren't together, but try to hide it with forced smiles and impromptu snacks. The hardest part isn't what was broken, but the part of me that doesn't know if I'll ever be able to fix anything again. I go about my days in silence, like a temporary employee in my own life. I do the grocery shopping, wash the dishes, check the children's homework, and I avoid any mirror where I might have to look at myself with honesty. Ricardo tried to call once. I didn't answer. He sent a message saying he didn't understand what had happened, that all he wanted was to be with me. I didn't reply to that either. Not because I wanted to fix things with Gustavo, but because I realized Ricardo was never important to me. He was just a poorly chosen escape. If I saw him on the street today, I wouldn't even know what to say. He wasn't to blame for my infidelity. I chose him. I put myself in this situation. Every decision was mine, and so every consequence is mine to bear. One afternoon, while the children were with Gustavo, I sat in the kitchen with a notebook and a pen. I started writing everything I wish I had said to Gustavo before we signed those papers. Not to give to him, but to understand myself. I wrote that I admired him, that even though I didn't say it, I always felt he was the anchor of our family, that his silences used to bring me peace, and that when I started to drift away, it wasn't from a lack of love, but from my own inability to admit that I needed help, that I was empty and didn't know how to ask to be seen differently. I wrote that I never wanted to see him broken, that I never imagined him capable of the kind of revenge he took, and that, even though it hurt, I now understand he had no other way of making me feel what I had put him through. I don't know if he'll ever read it. Maybe he shouldn't, but it felt good to write it. The children ask fewer questions now. At first, they would look at me strangely, as if waiting for me to announce it was all a big misunderstanding and that their father was coming home. Now, they just adapt. I try to give them stability, to be present, to not cry in front of them, but I know they've changed. I see it in how they speak, how they say goodbye, how they ask whether they'll be at Dad's house or mine for the weekend. I took from them the idea of a united family, and there's no way to give that back. Gustavo is a perfect co-parent from a distance. He picks them up on time, speaks to them with affection, and takes care of them. But he doesn't come into the house, not even to say hello. He declines joint invitations to birthdays or school meetings. This punishment, I think sometimes, is worse than any fight. My job remains suspended. The internal investigation stalled. They found no proof that I had compromised my performance or committed a serious offense. But they offered me voluntary termination with a minimal package. I accepted without a fight. I didn't have the strength to fight for anything. I've looked for other jobs, updated my resume, gone to interviews. But it's not easy to walk out into the world and act as if you aren't branded as someone who threw her life away for a story that wasn't worth it. Some nights, I wake up and it all feels like a distant dream, as if someone else lived this. Then I look around the quiet house and realize, no, this house is emptier because I am the one who emptied it. I have no long-term plan. I don't know if I'll rebuild my life, if I'll ever trust anyone again, or if I'll find a way to forgive myself. But I know that nothing I do can repair what I broke. I can only try not to keep damaging what's left. And what's left are two children who need a mother who is present, coherent, and sincere, even if she isn't perfect, even if she has already failed. I don't want them to remember me for the damage, but for what I tried to rebuild in the aftermath. I don't know if I'll succeed, but I have to try. And if one day Gustavo walks through that door again, even if it's just to talk, to see each other without resentment, to share a meal without tension, I'll know that at least some part of this was worth it. But if he never comes back, if he decides his path is far from mine, I will accept that too. Because for the first time in a very long time, I know that I deserve this. And knowing that, even though it hurts, is the beginning of something more real than everything that came before.